So clickbait titles are dumb. But so I've gone through holding in a Tibalt grip before, but I used a fucking LARP sword and like whatever. So I'm just going to quickly cover that and then progress into just how to hold a sword in general. The simplest idea of how to hold a sword, I'm going to poorly quote from John Chow's fucking saber book. How do you hold a sword with your hand? And this is as far as you kind of get through it. So very briskly with the Tibalt grip, just to rehash it, is lying very long through here, allowing this to happen. It also means that if you've got a hilt that opens up on the back side of it, it's harder for your fingers to get fucked up, right? So you can have both fingers on each side, well, over the top, and then having the pommel go in line. The handle goes in line with the whole arm, so that all your extensions are nice and dainty and over the top like this. There's a little bit of hook around of the fingers, depending on the size of your hand and also the width of the handle. But it's mostly so that these rotations are nice and comfy. Cool. Now, how do you transition from that into cutting positions? Most times when you're cutting, if you're holding it like such with the quillions horizontal and you can get these nice little rotations really comfortably, the other person is going to be the reason that you get into a cutting position. And it's usually from really harsh sentiment, harsh shoves. They shove your blade over in this crooked arm position. From here, it's a little awkward to pull the thumb and put it on this side, and then your extension of the thumb helps do a twist by shoving through, right? It's awkward. But if someone shoves your sword out of position and you get up like this, it's nothing to flick around this side, turn the body, and then during this flicking position, notice how my hand opens up and I pull, and I end up with the thumb up against the side of the blade. I end up with the finger over the side. I end up with this kind of closed key grip that a lot of people like to use for rapier, or like this, or something along these lines, and then the thumb can support and pressure on there and press in there, and cool. Or you can end up from here pushed over and then end up with the thumb underneath the flap, similar to how like people apparently do Maya. Right? You can maybe, if you don't get shoved off but you do need those cutting positions, cut with this side and just straighten the arm and flick in, and the pressure of this finger going here does the chop. But also being able to do these cuts where during this position you're transitioning the thumb by just push. You'll see that all my blackening has like worn away here because my thumb pushes in to push on that position. It's like, oh, I got pushed off to here. My thumb has naturally done that. If I allow my pommel to go from in my wrist to into my hand, it naturally causes this transition here. And that allows flicking cuts in or pressures in and thrusting in over the top. Cool. Let's say you're not using a Tibalt grip, which is probably everyone else watching this. How do you hold a sword? This is in line with the previous parts of with your damn hands. If your teacher has told you that this is the perfect way to hold a sword and you hold it like this in every position, you may not have the best coach for your highest level advancement. And I say that scathingly. Because there isn't a single hand position that's perfect for all answers. Gravity is always affecting the sword. And every position they are in is slightly different every single time, from the position of the toes to the heel and everything else up that chain, all the way to how their fingers are interacting with their sword. And you can't track them all. So you just need rough approximations, and you need to be just as malleable as they are. Or don't be, and just be mediocre, that's fine. So we're going to look at a very traditional Italian position. A lot of people get this vilely wrong. There was a coaching cue that Emerson Hurley found, and I think it was an 18th century or 19th century text, where I was like, try and, like, a lot of people like the other one of like trying to hold a bird in the hand without hurting it, but you still hold it. Yeah, right. That's nice and esoteric. If it works for you, I love that for you. But I don't like it. The one that Emerson found was you want to hold it like a violin bow. And what are you doing with a violin bow? Usually in interactions like this. So that's already very cool that there's a massive synergy right there. Like, oh yeah, we want to be actually making the same interactions of this push, draw, pull. It's not so that we can do draw cuts or like chops or whatever. It's because we're thrusting and then retracting. It's not that we're stabbing in and pulling it out. No. It's because the sword flies like that. Now, I will not elaborate on that. But what I will elaborate on is, if you look at my finger, it controls these bars. And it controls this quillian block. I don't pinch this. I think to say it's a pinch grip is a bit too simple and a bit too cute, that you miss nuance and you don't develop. No, it's my finger does this to interact with this and this. My fingertip controls not only, well, like the fingertip of my right index finger controls this quillian. So if I want to move that quillian somewhere, it's mostly in the push of my fingertip like this, but on this spot. And that helps me get into fourth position, and it helps me think about high fifth positions, right? It helps these rotations, helps me go from first to second to third to fourth to fifth, right? And then I'm using this. I have no idea if my camera will pick it up, but I have like my flesh looks different here. It's really smooth, it's kind of a little bumped in. I don't know if you can see it. Just assume I'm telling the truth. I push. I use this part. I use my knuckle. I use my punching knuckle. But a little ahead of it, just on here. And that does all my rear quillian control. So if I want to transition from fifth to fourth, to third, to second, to first, I'm mostly, until I get to about here, because gravity is now affecting my quillians and affecting this rotation, I'm pushing with this. So all of a sudden I've got this kind of play where if I'm holding in a nice fourth, this whole section is being held by this finger. I can push my quillian, or I can push my quillian. So what's my last thing doing? I have a thumb. Most of us have these. And that is going to be my guide for my point. My point goes into position because of my thumb, while being informed by my main finger. So I will extend as if my main finger, my index, is pointing, So mechanically through my body, I'm extending like this. But this lateral guide here and a little bit of the lift and a little bit of the push down. So if I want to lift, I like slightly scoop up ever so slightly and I attach on this quillian block, or I push on this bar, right? Whatever it needs to be. Right? My thumb dances from these landmarks all through this space constantly to allow all these different holds, because they all affect things. Sometimes I can end up here because I needed my hilt ever so slightly out that way, but I still needed this rotation. I wanted to come into second, but I had a really retracted arm or whatever, right? Because gravity is affecting it this way. So my thumb can hook or push or push or push. And then that goes in tandem with this finger. So I can push this quillian down and push that thumb up, and I get into second, I get into first. I get into first. I can have a first where my finger is this part here, hooking on that bar, and placing it in here. You'll see that's all worn away. Boom. And then my thumb is slightly digging in on that side of the bar. Just here. And I get up into a nice, high, comfortable first. Then I can come back down. My thumb is laterally holding the whole sword at the moment, where I've got a slight hooking of these two fingers. Maybe my pinky's involved, maybe it isn't. Depends on what's happened. And then I can laterally shove to get into third, because I couldn't push with this finger at that moment. Maybe I was up here and like, whoop, I needed to get it here nice and briskly. So this lateral thumb shove rotates in my hand. Suddenly my palm, I don't know what this protrusion here is digging in on the bar. But then as I rotate it in, the pommel and this space here is now between the bones. And maybe I keep going, and then the only thing holding it from doing this is the pad and the meat of my hand. Right? Like, and these are all very intuitive and very unique to exactly, each of these positions is unique to exactly how my hand can most comfortably hold the sword. This is the most advanced way of holding a sword. Having a minute and unique hand position for almost all interactions. And as I'm doing this myself right now, I'm exploring and feeling it myself of like, oh yeah, I'm naming these moments, but I usually don't name them, because they're not so important to name as you do it. They're important to have happened and almost no one noticed. I find that quite beautiful. There is a few things that will stop you wanting to explore this. The first is the idea that the position or your hand needs to be able to resist vicious and violent force at all times. This is untrue. It doesn't matter where you're fencing in the world. You don't need to have the position that resists the most force at all times, because the other person is not imparting the most force at all times. They're only imparting the most force on your sword when they are. That is such a minute amount of the time when you're fencing that I just want to cover that base. I just want to make sure that they can't. Cool. While you're making sure that they can't beat your sword across the room, they're abusing you for having a cracked out, awful hand position by slamming through with something that is regardless of strength. To me, this is great. If I don't like you, I'd rather you did that, so it's just easier for me to get this done and dusted. But if I care about you, I kind of get depressed. The only thing you truly need to care about is holding it in such a way that it allows your strong and your weak to be where they're meant to be. I can hold my sword like this, and as long as I put it forwards and brace it lightly, even with this hand position, and you swing with a fucking halberd, as long as I put the metal in the way correctly at within the weak of the halberd, I can deal with it. That's not because my hands are otherworldly strong. And they are quite strong because I've worked on that to assist with this, but it's not because of my strength. It's because levers fucking negate levers. If I'm stopping your strong with my weak, I'm a moron. And the person who I'm stopping their strong with my weak is double the moron. So I'm winning using things that I shouldn't win with against people who don't know how to abuse me for being wrong. Well, that just sounds like a fucking whole little typhoon of bullshit. Depressing, right? And you remember that I came to these positions of like my thumb on the side, or I go to maybe even hammer grip, but I don't know, I don't think I've consciously hammer gripped anything in years. But if I want to hit strong, this is enough, this thumb on the side, because this isn't so that I can hit you concussively. No, the rest of my body powering this does that. My fingers don't do that. My arm doesn't do that. I just now can have this angle nicely, that this space here can occupy your weak. And this can remain free. And in that moment, I'm able to go fonk and use my twist of my body and the power from my legs and my movement does the strength. It doesn't add to the strength of my arm. It's the same way that good boxers punch. Their arms are not cannons so that they can punch hard. They're resistant conduits that allow the force and energy of the legs and the body moving through space so that the arm doesn't blow up on impact. Because that is what they will do. So as you get better at this and you start thinking about your thrusting and like actually thrusting through interactions beautifully, you start opening up these ideas of like, well, if I hold it tight and I go to here, but I keep getting hit in the head, if I wreck my wrist, this doesn't come intuitively because my wrist wants to defend itself, and then my tip gets funny, and maybe I keep missing my thrusts. Oh, okay. But if I do this, and my knuckles brace against here ever so slightly, my finger hooks here, and I actually let go with my thumb, I get my hilt in a beautiful position. I get to have their weakest starts getting collected by this ring, this quillion. And then my point goes where I want it to because I'm able to guide my point with my thumb over the back of the handle. I get to go chunk. Oh. That was a lot better than these that weren't working, and then like maybe the flat would whip over and hit me in the head. Or it would bend and hit here, or they would yield and hit here because they can see the shape, and I end up in there strong with my strong, so their weak is still free and it still floats through. And it's like, oh, but I'm holding it how coach told me to hold it. Why can't I do a high fourth? This is fine. If they go to transition a thrust into the hardest shove of your life, like, oh, when they break your fingers, you just feel it. Like, oh, hello, don't fucking do that. And then you've ended up in here, this awful position, but they're currently going that way in this tempo, so it's fine. And then you can smack them. These are all different ways of holding the sword, and they all have different reasons. I'm trying to think of like any other things that I do that are just cracked out nightmare positions. I do this sometimes when my thumb is hooked my fucking sword, and I've come up and I've thrust through. I start going over their strong, which promotes an attack, a yielding attack through my strong. That's great. So I thrust through your strong over the outside. You go, but Mosh, I can counter thrust in fourth. Like, yeah, cool. Bring that weak over here. Cool. And because I need to get this hilt up here while going forwards, if I held it like this and I went forwards, I wasn't going to get it much higher intuitively without maybe raising my toes, maybe leaning forwards and putting my bicep over my ear. But for whatever reason, that wasn't going to be intuitive. And like my main goal may have been at that moment to use my rotate on the ball of my feet to get my head past the point. I'm holding my sword like this. That's delusional. Except their point is over here. Their sword is crossed over the top. I've not let the weak be free so they can't yield in here. And I've sunk that point into their chest or into their neck or into their face. Sometimes even the low belly that I've gone, boom, thrust, boom, chunk. And I'm nearly pinch gripping this spot, or I'm using my thumb to hook it, right? Like, however I get this blade interaction that I care about, if I'm holding my sword like this at the end of it, that's still right. Funny high fourths, fifth, oh, fucking all the way back round and my thumb's underneath and I've hooked up under like that. Here, 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 here. I'm trying to think if there's anywhere else. Here, crooked positions like this where I need to occupy your weak that wanted to come up. Maybe you were here and you've thrust it through and I just need to occupy that and place that in. Oh, and lastly, the funny meme one, where you do all the same things, just off your pommel, and you do it for like 3 passes, because they forgot that you can just add an extra this much range because you're being a rat bag. Because we're playing a game, why not play games sometimes, right? If they blast your tip, you're going to be in an awful position. That's what you're trading off, right? You have no landmarks to hook onto and play on anymore, right? There's no pro gaming in this. This is just épée with a French fucking handle, right? Or foil with a French handle. So, I don't know, how do I end up cutting? I get these pushes where the thumb displaces here. I want to chop hard. I just dig the knuckle in. And especially like if it's going to be displace over, I've pushed the weak over with my back edge and I just extend in, and it's mostly the arm, not whipping it, but just straightening in, that just goes like a small lariat. Transitioning into here, thumb pushes through, thumb pushes through. For comfort, I do this little fucking twist where I twist with this. This is my true edge quillion. I try and get my true edge quillion all the way 360 with the least amount of hand change. I go from palm facing the ground to palm facing up. So my hand is doing like 90 degrees, sometimes 180, sometimes 90. but I'm getting a full 360 of the sword. This develops beautiful comfort in these rotations so that you can place things in. This is like a pinched open position like this, like a funny reverse knife hand, so that I can get a nice little in-forth where my Quillian deals with their weak. What else? I haven't shown this. From a 2-0 grip to going horizontal to their weak is getting collected into this quadrant, and I want to come up, and I end up like that. There is nothing wrong with this hand position. As long as I'm controlling the weak of your sword with my strong in that tempo, there's nothing the strongest people in the planet can do. For that tempo, for that moment in life and in time that will be forgotten, but in that one moment, this is often, hilariously, the correct action. Just here, collect, place that in. Now my body behind it is informing a lot of that. Overall, I'm just doing shit like this, because that's how I can get the sword into the right place. I don't care about having to resist the hardest blows, and I will fence like this and play like this against some of the best bowhurt players in the world. Not in my country, in the world. And I will comfortably play like this, and I will do longsword comfortably like this. Playing and like, yes, they're also not trying to break me, but they also go like, no, that's real as fuck. So when those guys that actually go nuclear go, no, that's real. That's fucked that you could do it, but it feels real. It's like, oh, cool. It's real. I don't know. I don't see enough people talking about this being okay, because this dogmatic, super authoritarian, super industrialized fake idea of, no, there is a perfect way to hold the sword and you do it for everything, is a major reason why we've got a bunch of dogmatic, industrialized people who are still shit at fencing. And if you're watching this, I don't want you to be. So yeah, that's how to hold a fucking sword.